You're listening to Neurodivergent Mates. Hello. Do we have... No, it's working. Can you hear me okay, Katie?
Yeah.
All right. Sweet. Oh my God. Sorry, everyone. So if you're only just listening to this now, we came in live probably about 5 minutes ago. There was all this terrible reverb going on. I have no idea what was going on. So we just canceled the whole thing, had to redo a new link and all of this stuff. And we're here now. So I apologize for anyone who was listening beforehand and you had to listen to all of that because it would have sounded like ripe garbage. But look, welcome to Neurodivergent Mates. It's 2025. We're on our 4th season. So awesome stuff. But I tell you what, not as awesome as the guest we've got here today. Joined with my awesome friend, Katie Fleet, to talk to us about the importance of neurodivergent teachers. Katie, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Oh, well, you know what? I was really starting to stress for a bit there. You know what I mean? I was really stressing, you know, because...
We got some. It sounded like a Daft Punk, apparently a remix.
Yeah, totally. So, oh my god. So yeah, you know what? There's nothing worse than, you know, especially doing a podcast and being a podcast host, especially when you're going live and things like that just happen out of the blue that you least expect it, and then yeah, you've just got some issues and you have no idea what's going on. But look, we're here now. That's the main thing, and we're ready to rock and roll, you know. But look, what's been happening with you so far? How was your Christmas?
Oh, Christmas was good, as we were just talking about off air. I'm about 8 months pregnant, so just thriving and surviving, I think, is probably...
Good job. The thriving and surviving will probably kick in after the 9 months, correct? That will just be normal life, I'm assuming.
Well, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how motherhood as someone with ADHD and dyslexia goes, but I'm excited. I think it'll be lots of fun and maybe some challenges.
I'm sure you'll be a natural, my friend. I'm sure you'll be a natural. Will the kid be born holding a kite surfing? Because you're a big kite surfer, correct?
Love kite surfing. Yeah, she'll be in the water from day one, I think. Just
yeah, nice.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. But look, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for being so patient with all those technical difficulties before. Like I said, that's not a normal thing within the podcast here, but awesome stuff. But look, before we get started, I will just do a little bit of housekeeping for any new listeners out there. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. We're available on TikTok. Or maybe not TikTok if you're in the United States, right? I think I heard some people say that it's now back up in the United States. So interesting time. So if you're in the United States, I apologize. You won't be able to watch us there, but maybe you will. Who knows? Also, too, we're available on Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And also, too, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media pages. And please also go to neurodiversityacademy.com to check out all the work that we're doing there. Another big thing, another important thing about having Katie on today, she's one of our advisory board members. So you might be able to advise me on some things I'm doing wrong with the podcast. What do you reckon, Katie?
No, I think you're smashing it, but very important. Go to that address because Will's constantly updating, uploading, and there's some fantastic resources there, which I think are going to help a lot.
Totally. No. There is. So please check it out. Got some awesome, and we've also got some really big things on the horizon too. So, you know, if you can sign up, it gives you a really good chance to sort of keep up to date with what we're going over as well. Now, also too, just a little bit of a warning for maybe some listeners. some of the discussions may be triggering. So if you need help, please reach out to a loved one or call emergency services. We are not doctors. This is a space for sharing experiences and strategies. Do you know what some of the funny stuff about, well, not funny stuff, but like there's been a few times where I've read that and I'm like, well, actually, the person we do have on is actually a doctor. So,
hey, I'm going to say now, not a doctor, Will. So we're not, no responsibility between the two of us. But I think, yeah, very important things.
Very true. Very true. It is definitely good to cover that type of stuff. So also too, if you've got any questions, please put that, you know, if you're listening to us on whatever social media platform you are while we're going live, please just shoot it out in the comments there. Ask any questions you might have. Maybe share some of your experience if you've got some. That would be really cool as well. So, Katie, you ready to rock and roll, my friend?
I'm ready. Let's go.
You're born ready, right? All right. So we might just start with the normal one. Look, you know, let's hear a little bit about yourself. You know, who is Katie Fleet?
I'm still working it out, but I'll give you the where I'm at. So my name's Katie. I'm obviously a POM, English originally, and then I've moved to Australia for, you know, to explore new things and meet people like Will, which I'm very, very grateful for. I have been a trained teacher for probably about 12 years, 15 years, seems to have flown by. I was diagnosed dyslexic when I was 7 years old, and I only received my ADHD diagnosis last year, which has been a really interesting journey for me, but has definitely filled in some of the gaps and, you know, made me realize why dyslexia wasn't kind of lining up for me. And yeah, I now work for Autism Spectrum Australia. I do some work with you. I still work on school boards in the UK. And as you sort of introed, my big passionate area is supporting neurodivergent teachers and students in our schools.
Yeah, totally. I think it's definitely an important thing. And, you know, I think the interesting thing, and we'll cover this more during the podcast. And like, I think when you and I first sat down and, you know, you shared a lot of like your experience as a neurodivergent teacher, it was actually interesting to hear about some of the stuff that you've come up against while doing that. And, you know, some of it good, maybe some of it really negative as well, which really blew my mind. But we will listen to a little bit more about that in a sec. But look, to tell you the truth, I would love to like hear a little bit, like you do some work for Aspect. You know, I'd love to, you know, hear a little bit more about, especially the work you're doing in the neurodiversity space.
Yeah, so with Aspect, I'm the National Evaluation Manager in Education. So I look at how we measure student outcomes, both in the wellbeing space, but also academically. And that's a really interesting space because it's highly under-researched, and have some amazing research colleagues like Vicky Gibbs. I'm sure people will know about that, about her and her work, and Chris Edwards and individuals like that. I more work in action research, so ongoing in schools, supporting teachers. The other thing I guess I haven't mentioned is I also work casually at UTS, so University of Technology Sydney, and Torrens University teaching students. And that's so probably a big thing that we'll get into today is how do we support and develop both neurotypical teachers to understand the challenges in classrooms, but also how do we attract more neurodivergent teachers and how do we support them? Because at present, training systems for trainee teachers who are neurodivergent are pretty, they're not great. And that's not bagging out the institutions. That's more on, you know, how the requirements to become a teacher are written.
Yeah, no, interesting. Sorry, out of curiosity, I was just thinking, right, like you were talking about, especially with the work that you do with Aspect, is that you're evaluating student outcomes, probably their experiences, all of that. How do you go about that? Especially like you were saying, there's very limited research on that. How do you make decisions on certain things when the research just isn't there to back it? Are you sort of like guessing? Or is there some method in place?
No. I think it's a really interesting question. It's still something we're at the very early stages of. Ultimately, it is, you know, measuring growth within education is down to the student themselves. So it's that real person-centered approach. And I like to think of myself as, you know, how did I feel growing up? So when I was assessed for reading as a dyslexic, oh my gosh, like I didn't hit any of the national benchmarks, any of the outcomes. I was always there labeled failing. So it's really important we move away from those labels where we pigeonhole children against the national curriculum. And instead we look at it, we break it down, we chunk it, and we're looking for just little pockets of growth. They can be anything in any area, and we celebrate those, and we identify the areas where they really need support. But I hope we're moving away from the days where we look at children as failing if they are not meeting, you know, each milestone in every key learning area exactly when the government tells us we should be.
So if I think back to when I was in school, I was in grade 12, and my reading is so much better now compared to, and I don't know how that sort of happened, because I don't spend heaps of time reading, but my reading is just so much better now than what it was in school. But I remember them saying like, oh, you're reading at a grade 5 level, and when I was in grade 12, if that makes sense. So are you sort of saying that you don't have that type of stuff? You wouldn't say, hey, Jimmy, so you're actually reading at this level. Come on, you need to get better there, type of thing. How does that process look? Because you say you reward people rather than sort of say what I just said there. Because I can tell you right now, being told when I was in grade 12 that I was reading at a grade 5 level, that didn't help me to go, geez, I better read better because I'm at a grade 5 level. That just made me go, yes, it's confirmed I am a failure. I should really give up, if that makes sense.
100%, and that's a very common thing we see. So, I mean, we're moving away, I hope, from this model of, you know, we've got to hit these outcomes. And the reason, Will, you probably read much better now is because you now read stuff that interests you. So
yeah, you're dead right.
That is one of the biggest, you know, issues in teaching, is we have something called differentiation, where we can change the curriculum a bit to suit individuals. But if your HSC English text is To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, mine was To Kill a Mockingbird, I can't say I really related to the southern states of America. And, you know, I can't even remember what it's about. It's about justice, I think, for individuals in southern states, and probably a race argument. So, of course, I'm not going to read it very well because I don't know the vocabulary. I've never been exposed to it. I'm not interested in it. So what we're looking at when we talk about assessing outcomes is that we're giving, it starts from the experience and the opportunities we give children in the class to engage with something they enjoy and interest. And a lot of people associate that with autism. It's not just autism, everyone. You don't have to be neurodivergent to want to read things. And we talk about reading diet. So, you know, growing up, I love magazines, and I love to, you know, read books about horses because I loved horses and sailing. So for me, that's what got my vocabulary ticking, etc. But the way our curriculum is developed at the minute, if you have, the further you go up, the more the texts are restricted. And that's where the issues can really come, because are we actually assessing your knowledge, or are we just assessing your engagement in a piece that we've given you that you don't really, you know, relate to?
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to think back to what I used to like reading back then. You know what I think? So this might sound weird. I would enjoy reading little articles that stood out to me in the paper. Do you know what I mean? I might see something and be like, oh, that's interesting. And then, but I could never read like a full, like, what do you call it? Like a journal article, whatever it's called. What do they call it when they write like a piece in the paper, right? But I would read enough to just comprehend what it was about. And then I could be like, I would see the picture. I could never really read ones that didn't have a picture. If there was some interesting picture there, I would then read a little bit about it and go, so that's what it's all about. Oh, interesting, you know. But it wasn't, I could only read, and even now, I would only read to a certain amount to get like the gist of it, or I'll read the heading. So say if there's like 10 things to make you I don't know, exercise better, I'll just read the headings and be like, oh, okay, yeah, easy, just little things like that.
I think there's so many things that in a good way, with technology changing, we have the options. And this is where I'm really interested. I think Craig Smith was on earlier, a colleague of mine. His big area is AI and, using AI positively. And we were in a chat the other day about, it's actually really exciting because you and I would see, if you and I sent each other a 5-page email, we'd probably put into ChatGPT and say, what is Will trying to tell me? Please give me Whereas we would get fatigue. Like 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to spend 2 hours reading this, writing down what Will needs. And then, the ADHD procrastination would kick in. Then I might off-put it. So there's some really positive things coming through, I think, to support us. But at the same time, you see universities, especially, or the tertiary sector, saying you can't use AI because they're cheating. So the reason I'm probably not giving you a clear answer on assessment and all that is that we're in a really transient change. And I think it's exciting, but we also need to, if we stop using things to help neurodivergent people, again, that's another barrier, the equity is still sliding. So when we think about assessment, whether it's in schools, in universities, etc., we really need to think about, is it directed so that people are interested? Are people engaged? And do they have everything they need to learn the best they possibly can?
Now, interesting. So out of curiosity, right? So my email I sent to yourself today, right? Was that too long?
No, that was because I was engaged in it. I was interested. I read it. And I guess we've spoken about this before. My father is dyslexic as well. We both have it. He failed all of his HSC the first time round. And then, 10 years later, he gets a PhD and he's written, 100,000 words about mud, rock and petroleum. I cannot think of anything more boring. But to him, he could do that because he was so interested in it.
Yeah.
So that's a prime example of, and a lot of people, I think, who are neurodivergent, if you have a terrible experience at school, you may not go on to study. And if you don't have a role model, you may not go on to study. But you do find a lot of neurodivergent people in academia because with their PhDs, because they finally got to do something they love.
Yeah, that is cool. That is interesting too. Because the reason why I brought up that email was I had originally wrote it with just chucking all my ideas out there, and it sounded so if you were to read it without before I put it in ChatGPT, you'd be like, what the hell's Will on about? But I put it in there and I just said, ChatGPT, can you make this more simple and easier to understand? Originally there wasn't the headings, how I had the headings and that in that email, those weren't originally there and all that. But what I'm sort of getting at is that that's the beauty of how technology is helping us to get a better understanding of how to maybe present this to certain types of people.
100%. And there's so many things, we're talking about the high-end tech part of teaching and strategies, even things like mind map or visual cues. I find them really, I love a mind map. And people look at me. The other day, actually, I did one with colleagues in a planning session, and I stood back, and it was literally it looked like someone had tried to draw a hurricane or a twister.
Oh, really? Just everywhere.
One of them said, they're neurotypical. I think we might have to redraw this just so the rest of us can understand. So I'll take my copy, you do you.
But you probably understood it perfect, right?
Oh, I loved it. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I've got my project plan for 2025. I am clear, but they had to go away and just get it in an order.
Sorry, just this is an unrelated topic, but I had to laugh when you told me this. Has your father been asked to assist in any births on planes recently?
Have I never taught? Yeah, he gets
sorry. So for all of our listeners, right, we were talking about how doctors get Sorry, can you just hang on? My cat, I think, is meowing here. I don't know what she's doing. I think she might be stuck outside. Give me 2 secs. Hang on.
No worries.
What are you doing? Sorry, my cat is like right here. Meadow. She is like meowing. I don't know what's wrong with her. Off you go. Anyway, sorry about that, everyone. My cat has just come to. Come on, you want to come up? Hang on,
Is she a regular guest of the podcast? Well,
no, she's never been a guest of the podcast. Here she is. Meadow, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, she's usually pretty good. I've never heard her meowing so much. But sorry. So for all of our guests, so we were talking one time about, like, you know, all these doctors. You may not even be a medical doctor, but you still present on a your plane ticket that you're a doctor, correct?
Yeah, I think you can now choose. So he does take it off because he has been bing-bonged before and asked to come. I'm a doctor of rocks, so if this lady's having a baby, I really don't think I'm going to be much better.
Yeah. I just thought that was hilarious when you told me that. I'm like, and I wonder what the look on the air host that would be like. Oh, yeah, true. Anyway, everyone, that's just us sidetracking on ADHD minds right there. But look, let's move into this a little bit more. So what's it like being a neurodivergent teacher, out of curiosity?
When you sent that question through, it really got me thinking. So I've obviously told you about the experience I had. My first year of teaching in the UK, I worked at a very posh private school and I was very careful not to say anything. And then one day it came out. I don't know how it came out. And several of the parents made complaints because they didn't want, they were paying, I don't know, £20,000 a year for their kids to be educated, correctly. And they had this dyslexic teacher who was, educating and teaching their children English, which they couldn't get over, a dyslexic teaching English. And it's not my favorite subject to teach. However, over the years since then, I've really got into it and I love it. So I think from a biased point of view, and I'll talk more to you about this later, about how I think we feel we're perceived as neurodivergent teachers. And that was really quite challenging. It really nearly drove me out of the profession, that experience. Then I went to teach our sort of kindy kids in year one in a public school, and I loved it. And that was right up my alley because it was very ADHD, very, grab some Lego, let's play music, it was that whirlwind. And I do think being a neurodivergent teacher really depends on what your diagnosis is or your neurological condition as to what structure you like, what environments you like. But I think we all share one thing, which is that burnout. We burn out much faster than a neurotypical teacher. The stimulation, imagine if you were in an office with 30 people talking at you all day. Every day.
True. Yeah, true.
Stimulation is insane. My partner is a teacher. He's neurotypical, and he comes home and he spends about an hour just sat in silence. And I get it because there were days where I would just, wouldn't go out. I'd spend the whole weekend at home. And me, I'm very chatty and very bubbly, but the burnout is incredible. Just from the sensory overload is a lot.
What, out of curiosity, what was your favorite grade to teach? Like, what grades have you taught? And was like the preschool stuff like that cool? Or did you prefer the high schools or?
It's a good question. So I've taught year 5, year 6. So grade 5, I get confused. New South Wales were year 5, year 6. Yeah. Taught kindy, I've taught year 1, year 2. And then when I went to work in a specialist school, I taught teenagers with intellectual disabilities. I really like them because you kind of were preparing them for life and you could have those kind of conversations. But I do love kindy year 1 just because it's absolute chaos. And it's also the stuff that comes out of their mouths is amazing. Like just things you're like, wow. I remember a kid, we made a role play area and their homework was it was for the rainforest. They had to go away, make a rainforest creature and bring it in on Monday. Yeah. and they're coming up and they're showing me, and we've got, the pythons and the pumas and all that. Probably, I don't see, I'm saying things I'm still not sure if they're meant to be in there, but whatever. And then this one girl brought God. She'd made God. And I was like, all right. And she just went, Miss Fleet, God is everywhere. And I was like, I can't even argue with that.
Yeah, true. Yeah. What did God look like, out of curiosity?
I mean, toilet roll with some wings and a halo. But
okay.
I love that, their argument is so well rational. The rationale is so clever. And who am I to say that that is not the right thing? Like, I loved her. So yeah, I just love their little minds and where they're at and what they think about.
Yeah, like creativity would be pretty cool too. Like, wow, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. They just I think all kids can be really interesting. I probably don't quite like when we get to that teenager hormonal level. That's not really me. I more embrace the chaos, if I'm honest.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think high school would be very challenging. If I think back to when I was young, I was, and I think it was because, like, especially during primary school, I had built up such a, I was one of those kids who would speak back and, swear at the teacher and stuff like that. But I think it was more because, not because I was a bad person, but there had been so many years where teachers had treated me like absolute crap but some of them were great, where others didn't give me the time or effort. So I just built up this this attitude type of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that is probably an indication of a teacher who's, not loving the profession. Whilst you're always going to prefer some students over the other, I've never got to the point where I'm like, I really hate that kid. Like, and I think once you get there, you're in a danger zone, because why is a kid acting like that? Probably because you spent so many years having to mask and being told you're a failure because you didn't meet expectations, the curriculum, etc. So of course you're going to be a bit gobby and kind of have a poorer experience. So it's on us as professionals to understand that. Do you know? I think it's really important. And I like the idea of, there's something called team teaching, which is a bit of a luxury, but it's where you might teach a class, half a week, and then your other teacher comes in. So it stops you having that reaction to this kid that's really winding you up, because you find someone who's kind of got the opposite love, and you're like, cool, let's do this. Like, Freddie is really irritating me today. And someone will be like, I love Freddie. I'm going to go in with the sarcasm, and I'm going to...
Yeah. and it was actually interesting because I was speaking to this lady the other day, and she used to be an arts teacher at the school. And she said by the end of it, I think she'd been doing it for 20 something years. She was just burnt out by the end of it. But we were actually speaking about this topic about, like, I feel that some of the teachers some of them just hate their job and have been there for years, can almost have a negative effect on that. That negativity on their role, hating it, can almost have that effect on their students as well. I think I came across some teachers who were close to retirement. They're not going to quit, go do another job for 2 years and then retire. They're going to, ride it out type of thing. And you could sometimes see that with some teachers. Not all. Some were really great. But others, I definitely saw that in them.
And I think, we've got to be careful. I hate, teachers are a really curious breed, because once you meet another, you can be, I've been on beaches on holiday. You meet a teacher, I don't know, from Canada, and you're like, straight away, you're into it. You get each other. But every other profession has the same issues. Someone's
totally.
They're bitter, they're burnt out, so it's really important. And that's something I'm beginning to understand my ADHD, is to recognize, it's on me to recognize when I'm burning out, when I need to step away. And yes, if you're nearing retirement, you might not have the luxury of changing jobs, but you can make, there are ways of changing your approach to things or doing things differently. So I guess I just want to point that out, that it's not all about
so we've got Craig has come through with a really big comment here. I'll do my best to read this out. So he's wrote, and by the way, thanks heaps, Craig, for reaching out. You're a legend, my friend. So love Katie Fleet's comment on evaluating neurodivergent student educational process from an individualized standpoint, where standardized benchmarks are replaced by sensitive progress markers that measure growth in domain specific to the scope of the student. The qualitative impact and requirements of this on a non-standardized metric are so valuable to consider. Thank you so much for sharing. Did I do all right reading that out?
I would be really
nailed that, didn't I?
And that's lovely because I know Craig and he's a teacher, so it's lovely to have that feedback. Thank you. Craig.
No. It's always good when people reach out. So, Craig, thank you so much for sharing that. But how can neurodivergent teachers create change? Because, we've shared a little bit about what it was like being a neurodivergent student teacher. But how vital are these people to, creating this change that, I suppose we've been longing for such a long time in this industry?
I think it's so important. We want representation of neurodivergent people across the board. But I think if there was one thing I'd pin my hat on is, you and I will both had quite negative experiences at school. I'm sure a lot of our neurodivergent listeners did. If there was one argument for training neurodivergent teachers, it would be to have those role models, to have people that understand, to have people that can teach differently. And it doesn't need to be, my idea of different would be if I walked into a year 6 class tomorrow, I'd take texters, large pieces of paper, and we do mind maps, because I can guarantee that quite a lot of neurotypical teachers are not teaching that way, and that's fine. They have their styles. But we need to ensure we know that 10 to 20% of the classroom are neurodivergent, whether they're diagnosed or not. So we need to ensure that students are exposed to different styles of learning. And for neurodivergent kids, that's great because they're going to see, it's going to light a fire in them, hopefully. But also our neurotypical students need to understand there's different ways of, doing things when they get into the job market. There's different ways of running a workshop, engaging with colleagues. And it's that general education about neurodiversity and how our brains work differently that breeds tolerance, that breeds excitement. I really hope, a lot of my students at university don't leave my classroom thinking, what a waste of an evening. Because usually they've drawn 55 pictures and, wrapped something and done stuff that they wouldn't do in another lecture. So I hope that that's why we need neurodivergent teachers for all those reasons.
And I think going back on your experience at that posh English school, I think this is where these parents and maybe even the school aren't realizing that, hang on, we've got at least a certain percentage of these kids could even be our kids, are in our classes here. They don't see the value what that brings either, which is probably a hard thing to swallow as well.
Yeah, I think, those schools are very geared up and, I'm a big advocate of people should choose the education structure they believe in and they believe their children fit. But those schools are geared up towards, you get the best grades, you go to the best universities, and then you go into the job and you do, the best you can. Really, you get to 35, none of that matters, does it? As long as you're earning, support yourself. And ultimately, it's all about mental health and your life and your well-being and satisfaction. I would say neurodivergent people are the most motivated, most ambitious group of individuals. And I personally, my mental health has always suffered when I've been put in a box or I've been expected to reach, this outcome. I want to be free. I'm glad I've trained and passed exams, but it doesn't define me. I don't say, oh my gosh, I got an 85 ATAR, woo, that's not my label. So
yeah, no, totally. So we've just got another person who's commented, Ryan Nicholas. This is a fantastic conversation. It's great to see representation on the teacher side of the conversation. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Ryan. We really appreciate it, friend. It's actually really interesting you say that, right? Because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and like obviously the last couple of weeks, or the beginning of the year, all of social media, the papers, all of that are all showing all the kids who got like the high ATARs and all of that type of stuff, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and we're like, we see all these, especially the big private schools here in Sydney, they're sharing like, oh yeah, we got this, and we've got 4 students who got this, right? Now, what we were thinking about, we were like, imagine what those kids' life has been for however many years. They're probably, and a good friend of mine, he went to one of those real posh Sydney private schools here, and he said that it is about those grades type of thing, where your mental health comes second almost. And it's like, we're seeing these kids who are getting these top marks. What have they sacrificed to get those marks, and how is that going to evolve in the future? Because we sometimes will see some of these kids, some of them may go on to some really great stuff, but we may even see some of them get into university and then be like, oh, or even further, once they get into a job and be like, oh my God, studying out of a book isn't what it's all about. People skills and all of these other important skills that you learn besides getting great marks in school are just as important, if not more important, than getting good marks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, very sadly, if you look at the studies between suicide rates in youths and, academic outcomes, it is very high, particularly in those Asian countries where that is the expectation, the culture. And, it's heartbreaking to think that you would pin so much on. Obviously, everyone needs to be educated to a level where, they can go out, they can be part of society, enjoy life, earn money to contribute to a great lifestyle. But it shouldn't be the be all and end all of life in my mind. And I think teachers, we get into it because we want to, be part of growing society. That sounds very cheesy, but we're there to do a job to grow up with these people. We're not there to pump people of facts, them to be utterly miserable. Imagine if you work with someone and you just made them utterly miserable and then
Totally
to a horrible outcome. That's not why we get into it. We get into it to have fun. And I would say, and I'm sure a lot of teachers would say, you learn as much from the kids. I can still remember that kid and the role play corner. This is, 12 years later. And I still remember my amazing student teachers, my trainees that I've taught that really got it, because it's so, you want to go to work with people that love what they do and, want to be.
Yeah, totally. So Ryan's just come through with another thing, another big one here. So I'll do my best to read this out. I'm curious to hear what Katie thinks of the double empathy and the implications of that in the classroom. As a neurodivergent teacher, I get along quite well with my neurodivergent students, and there is just a gravity between the way I teach and the way they learn. However, neurotypical students don't always see the value of how I teach and sometimes refuse direct neurodiversity education. Did I read that out all right?
Yep. And that makes, so I think there's 2 parts here. There's the double empathy part, and then there's the bit about teaching. So double empathy is something I come up again and again and again with, where people really aren't understanding what I'm saying. And I guess I spoke to you about this before Christmas. I find it really hard as a dyslexic ADHD person to maybe talk to, I don't know, an autistic person or someone with OCD, because I'm like, oh, we're all part of the same crew. Like, we'll get it. And actually, we're not getting each other at all. And it's really challenging. But I kind of see it as if we want to move forwards as a movement, as a group, it's on me to try and rework that out, go away, have another think about it. And in terms of students, I get this, it's really interesting. I taught the last cohort I taught of student teachers. A couple of them were not impressed with my teaching style.
Really?
Said, I'm going to a ex-private school in Sydney and what you're teaching me is rubbish and I won't need this. And I was like, cool, well, you have a great time if you don't think like mental health.
Was that in uni? Where were they just out of uni?
They were doing their Masters of Teaching course, not at one of the institutions I've mentioned, at another institution.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or to get in trouble. But, you know, they generally believed, and that's fine. Do you know what? I think the really cool thing about being a neurodivergent teacher is I am trained to teach like a neurotypical teacher, but I also have a toolbox of neurodiverse things. I will use all my neurodiverse toolbox. If I have to, I'm going to teach neurotypical style. But saying that, you know, you're going to favor one or the other. And 90% of kids will get something out of the way you teach. So yes, there might be a few that don't understand, but would you have left others behind? I feel like if you're in a school, 90% of the teachers are going to teach neurotypical style. So if I'm teaching neurodiverse, that's okay because, you know, they're getting it in other lessons. They can apply those strategies. So I totally get it, Brian, because I've come up and I've had colleagues who are like, why are you doing that? Why are you using texters in a lesson? They're 11 years old. And I'm like, the whole premise of education is play and have fun. I don't care. Well, if you and I went into a classroom tomorrow and I got out Lego to teach something, you'd be in there. I know you would.
I'd be stoked. I'd be like, yeah.
Everyone gets to play. Like, why, when will you, you know, what age do you not want to go and play?
Yeah. Do you know what? That is so interesting because I had this really awesome teacher in grade 3. And she was very hands-on and all that. And I noticed a lot of the other teachers just didn't get along with her or didn't like her. And I think it was because she had such a different way of doing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do think it is hard if you're in an environment where all the teachers and the kids are very neurotypical focused. This is how we teach. And I had to jump around through a lot of settings to find the school that was right for me, the environment that was right for me. And I had to reach out to people on LinkedIn like you and like Craig. You know, I had to really give myself permission. And probably in my 20s and my teaching career, I didn't. I fully thought, I'm a teacher, I should be doing this and it's not working. Whereas double empathy, just having a conversation with you or having a conversation with someone I work with and saying, I don't understand why they didn't get that, you know, can really unlock some more thought. It's a hard concept and you may never be able to smash it 100%, but surrounding yourself with people that get it is probably half the battle.
I can't believe those teachers you're talking about were just like, nah, we're going to this school. We don't need to know this. That is so, it's almost like devaluing yourself because you're losing really important skills that could help someone.
It is, but at the same time, I think that's the culture of education in some settings. You know, it's a very traditional approach to education. And what it leads to is people that probably don't think outside the box, don't, you know, haven't been exposed to that tolerance. It's a bit like, you know, the same with religion. If you go to a school that's all white Christians, when you become prime minister and you go on a, you know, nice trip to, I don't know, Islamabad, are you going to relate and do the best kind of relations you can? Probably not, because you don't have a background in that. So, you know, it's, again, up to the individual and the person to breed tolerance and to have an open mind. And I think that's the really cool thing about neurodivergent teachers is we are like sponges. We just want to do everything. We want to have all the experiences, eat all the food. Oh my God, cultural day when, you know, all the trying it all. And oh gosh, yeah. Like, you know,
unreal.
live for.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So this next question, I'm pretty sure we've really covered that. Why do all teachers need neurodiversity training? I'm pretty sure we've covered that. Yeah. Is there any more you wanted to speak on that?
I guess my only reflection is that it's really interesting to me how much weighting universities put on this. You know,
What do you mean weighting?
Well, you'll find that in some degree courses, so you have a bachelor's of education, you have a master's of teaching. So master's teaching is usually 2 years, bachelor's is 4 years in Australia.
Yeah.
And, you know, on that course, you could have 1 or 2 hours of lectures around neurodiversity. And that's it for the whole 4 years. You know, you might do a bit of behavior, but I really believe that we do need more. Especially as diagnosis rates go up, we get a much more, you know, people become much more aware of, you know, neurodiversity, the neurodiverse movement, because we're seeing people on TikTok and Instagram, you know, people are getting, you know, more neurotypical people that might not be exposed to that are understanding it and, you know, getting exposure to it. And it's interesting, the national teaching standards have a very large block about disability, inclusion, all of that. But we don't focus on that at university, and we may not make that a priority in schools for professional development because there's so much else we need to do. So I think that's the thing. If I was to get on my soapbox, go to Canberra and advocate, I'd be pushing for a lot more of it in teacher training and ongoing.
Yeah, no, totally. So we've got a lot of people commenting through today. Your popular Katie Fleet. It's the Katie Fleet fan crew, right? Remember I sent you through that at sometime last year. So Craig has come through. It's interesting too, building on what Ryan just asked, thinking about the idea of personalization rather than thinking about a neurodivergent style of teaching or a neurotypical style of teaching. I wonder if it is more about getting to know the individual's personalities of each student and adjusting teaching instruction based on that, with full recognition of how difficult it is to do this with every individual student, but doing so in a way that doesn't erase all that we know.
I love that. So I think what Craig's saying there
is... Damn, I am read out today.
I can do the next one if you want. It's about that person-centered approach, which is what we've spoken about before, which is knowing the individual. Doesn't matter if you don't need a label. It doesn't need to be like Katie Fleet dyslexic.
Well, we spoke about this in the PD course that we developed. Correct?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We did that for tertiary educators. It's not about labeling people or seeking. It's about understanding what their needs are, what they enjoy, and then tailoring your lessons or your teaching to that. And I think, you know, it is hard when you've got a class of maybe 26, 30 kids to really get into the weeds of that and finding the time and the space. But Craig is right. That should be our number one thing that we're learning about our kids. And, you know, when you're sat in the classroom, you're watching, I don't know, Oliver flicking a pencil. So I know immediately Oliver likes to have a tangible thing.
Yeah.
So am I going to get the most out of him if I have like a fidget box or something like that? It is really important. And it really gets my goat when I go into schools and they have, you know, you must have seen these wheels on the wall where it's like about me. And it's like, hi, my name's Katie. I have a dog and I live on the northern beaches, when actually it's like, hi, my name's Katie. I don't do very well with LED lights. I get a headache and loud noises really affect how I work. And
yeah, well, that's what it should have, right? Yeah, totally. No, I can't say I've seen too many of those signs in my adult in my vocational education classes there. Sorry.
No, it's interesting. We're looking for our baby. We're looking for nurseries. And the other day I went in and this nursery, it had a wall display on the UN conventions of the child. And I was like, these 0 to 3-year-olds will not know what that is.
Wow.
And everything was written in text. There was no visuals. And it just blew my mind that this really expensive nursery in no way was inclusive. They obviously weren't person-centered. And I just said, as soon as we got in the car, to my partner, absolutely no. No way.
Yeah, wow,
no
crazy.
person-centered approach there. Our child will not be going there. So I do find it, you can tell as a teacher when you walk into an institution or in a setting straight away, do they understand person-centered approach? Do they not?
Yeah, crazy. So we are getting towards the end here. Awesome chat, by the way, and I'm so glad we were able to get onto this eventually after the technical difficulty at the beginning there. But what should parents and schools know about neurodivergent teachers? Now, we've sort of brushed a little bit on there, but did you want to go a little bit more onto it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, everyone who's listening will probably get by now. It's a benefit to have different types of people in your school or in your workplace. So neurodivergent teachers are amazing because at the minimum, we can support the 10 to 20% of kids in that school that need a role model, that need support, and to support other teachers in, best practice and how to apply specific strategies. We can model that. As a parent, I'm pretty sure, it's a high likelihood that my child is going to have dyslexia and ADHD. If I can't see a neurodivergent teacher in that setting, I think I'd be hesitant to send her to that school. I'd be quite concerned. But I also think we need to have a broader mindset. I love when you go on LinkedIn and you see, oh, Richard Branson, he's dyslexic, and everyone's like, woo, But then parents aren't willing to send their kids to a school where someone like Richard Branson could be teaching. It's almost. So I think we need to remove the barriers of what a neurodiverse teacher looks like, which apparently is someone who can't spell and is going to ruin their child's life and chance of a 99 ATAR. And think of it more like, think of the skills you're going to learn from that person that are going to help them in life outside of an amazing 100-point grade average.
It has so many benefits in so many ways, doesn't it? What advice would you have for other neurodivergent teachers out there? Because they may be and I think a big thing is, like, I'm very big on trying to create environments where people can be open about who they are, because I feel I'm able to work a lot better when I'm myself. But there might be a lot of neurodivergent teachers who are afraid to speak up out of backlash, or like we saw with what happened with you at that school there. So what's some advice you would give to some of these people?
I think it's really, if you feel comfortable speaking up, that's the number one. And I have this conversation with trainee teachers a lot because they don't disclose that they have a neuro, especially teachers with autism. They really believe that they're going to be, persecuted against, people won't want to hire them, etc. And what I say to them is reach out, find someone to talk to. Like, I still have great conversations with the people I've taught with or taught to be teachers. Find people on LinkedIn and Facebook who are in these groups and have those discussions. Ask if you can have 5 minutes on Zoom, because it helps having that discussion. I think I'm a big advocate of therapy. This year, I found the most amazing therapist who's neurodiverse, and it's changed my world, because he gets when, I say, I had a really overwhelming urge to chew on things this week, and he didn't laugh at me. He's like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. And we just have conversations about that. But I also think as a teacher, it's very easy to go and work in an environment that doesn't support you, that you don't see other colleagues who see you as a neurodivergent person and support you. So you have to find your place and your setting, and it might just take a couple of goes. And one piece of advice I give to my trainee teachers is don't jump at the first job. It's so easy to do. And
I was just thinking the exact same thing.
That's where I screwed up, because I was like, I have to get a job and I have to go teach at this private school, and it's going to be great. I should have casual taught. I should have reached out to people I knew. And if you're feeling burnt out as a teacher, say you're 10 years down the line as a neurodivergent teacher, reach out to me, reach out to other people. There are so many other cool jobs in education where you can make a difference. If you just need a break, It's not a bad thing.
Well, what would you say, like the job you're doing now, like that's a lot different from what you've done in the past, would you say, Katie?
Yeah, it's very different from what I've done in the past. I love it because I still get to work with schools, but I also love it because I've kind of found my people. Like, you know, it's taken me a while, but I've found my people. It's given me the opportunity to explore things, you know, meet people like you, keep doing things. So I think once I gave,
and you get to fly everywhere, right?
I do love flying. Yeah, I think just giving myself permission that I didn't have to be in a neurotypical bubble and follow everything was the most freeing point of all.
Do you ever find that, like, because of the job you're in now and the role that you're doing, you sort of like, at first, and it's probably a little bit different now because you've been working it for a while, but you don't feel as restricted anymore? It's sort of like, oh, can I do that? Or is it like that because you are working in that space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there's part of that, and then there's part of sort of seeking to be myself and learn, growing into my neurodivergent personality, which I probably masked until my late 20s. So I think whatever job I was in, now that I'm able to unmask a bit more, I'm probably more comfortable. Like, I don't think I could have come on a podcast like this 10 years ago. I don't think I would have been like, woo, I'm dyslexic, ADHD.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people, you know. I think a lot, and I think that is something that we're at, that like you know, when we can create these environments where people do feel more comfortable, maybe they can be more themselves or feel more comfortable to do that, you know. All of that type of stuff. Sorry, we've got one more, and this is a big one. Okay, so Ryan's come through again, and I'll do my best on this. Last question, I promise. Haha. I'm transitioning into music psychology academia because I think it's a better fit for me than high school teaching. In this endeavor, I've been desperate to output an article titled along the lines of where's my time out card amidst the teacher shortage we have in Australia. How do we best support neurodivergent teachers with having to rely on luxury strategies? I like the earlier talk about teen teaching, but as you said, it's such a luxury, especially I couldn't fit all the rest of that in. But we get the...
I think I get, well, first off, go Ryan for stepping out and going to do something else he loves. And high school teaching will always be there. That was always my thought. If it all goes Pete Tong, I can go back to teaching. We're good. The casual rates are great currently. It is a really hard conversation to have about luxuries. I like that you've called them luxury strategies. I think what, you know, we're talking about is strategies that benefit you as a neurodivergent teacher, if you are, or any sort of teacher, that support your well-being, your love for the profession. And can you ask for them when there's a teaching shortage and when there's so much, you know, political discourse around teachers, how much we earn, how much time we get off, etc., etc. Ultimately, it's an employer's responsibility to try and make an environment as, you know, supportive of you and your needs as anyone else. And that goes with the Disability Standards Act and all those other things. I think it's something we really do need to flesh out more with the teaching union, with the department, around neurodivergent teachers. That's probably, if anyone would like to, you know, my next role, that's what I'd love to be doing, is, you know, going into bat for neurodivergent teachers and understanding and teaching people about, we may need time off, but we could be doing some really cool stuff. I think when, as a teacher, you ask for time off, like, you know, you say, I'm sick. I remember going to school and being sick in a bin because I felt so guilty that I'd asked for time off and they'd made me feel so bad. This was in the UK, that I just sat in my classroom and was sick. How is that helpful?
How did you teach for the day?
I did it. Literally, I had like a year one kid just rubbing my head. Out the bin.
Are you okay, Miss? Are you okay?
I'm okay. I'm like, I literally have to be here. just go over there.
Oh my God.
this is where we need to, we do need to think about how, because ultimately, if you put these luxury strategies in, you will retain more teachers. And it is a real problem. I don't have a direct answer, Ryan, and I think you're doing the right thing by honoring what you want to do, go explore that for a bit and just see where you go. It doesn't mean, I did suffer with some sort of guilt about leaving teaching. It doesn't mean that you're leaving teaching. It means that you're going to do other things that can support individuals and teachers. But yes, I think there is a very big space for us to work. And this will come through the Neurodiversity Academy, where once we get further down the line, we're going to go into bat and get people more aware of what training is needed, what strategies are needed, etc. So actually, Ryan, it's probably Will that's going to fix all that for us, not me.
Thank you for the plug there, Katie. You rock. But we definitely will see how we go. So yeah, just one more shout out from Craig. Great talk. Thanks, Will and Katie. This was super. Thank you so much, Craig and Ryan, for coming in today. I love when people are interacting like that. It just makes it so much different. So thank you so much for everyone for listening. Now, Katie, if people did want to find out maybe a little bit more about your work or connect with you, where can they best find you?
Probably LinkedIn is the best place, but you're very welcome to come find me at any sort of aspect event or ring aspect. I'm sure they'll throw out my contact details.
Yeah. Katie's here today.
I'm always about, so yeah, feel free, but just drop me a message on LinkedIn or add me or whatever you want to do, and I'm always happy to chat.
Nice. Well, look, Katie, thank you so much for coming on today. Like, it's always a pleasure when we're talking. I've been so excited to get the advisory board members onto the podcast and talking all of that. I'm so excited for you to be becoming a mother shortly. So good luck with everything there. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. I'm sure I can come back with crazy tales of raising.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, maybe we could have a whole nother podcast episode on all of those tales. What do you reckon, Katie?
Oh, I'll start jotting them down as they go. But yes, no, that'd be wonderful. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. No, but look, thank you so much. Everything you've shared today has definitely opened up my mind and sort of really maybe reminisce on a lot of the things that were probably a lot of issues for me, especially at school. But I really hope a lot of people can take away a lot of the stuff that you've shared today and really maybe put some of that in practice or start really thinking a little bit more deeply on that.
Yeah, brilliant. It's never too late, I don't think, to learn. So I love that.
Totally. And look, for all of our listeners out there, if you haven't already done so, subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. My name's Will Wheeler. This is Katie Fleet, and this is Neurodivergent Mates. Till next time.